Why do your financial projections fail? I'll tell you why. It's because you're not using our 125-75 rule. Stick with us to the end of the video. We're going to show you how to implement this now for success in your next venture.
Awesome. And welcome back to Blunt Force Business, another episode of our business building podcast. My name is Patrick Marino.
And I'm Brian LaFauci.
And today we've actually got our own Blunt Force Business / Brian LaFauci authored rule for developing more effective financial projections that set you off on a course for success with your venture.
Success.
Either a new venture or just launching a new program.
Anything. Yep. It could
Exactly.
be new. It could be, hey, we want to add this product, add this service. We want to go in this direction. Well, if you didn't put projections together, then you're fucking stupid. So it's not there. You always want to be able to put this on paper first. But sometimes those still fail.
Well,
so we're gonna correct that.
Let's get right into the blunt force facts for today. So blunt force facts on the 125-75 rule for better financial projections. Blunt force fact number 1 is you never make as much as you think.
So the 75% rule of this piece here is the fact that once you get your projections put together, you're going to take everything that falls in the revenue category and you're going to cut it by 25% to 75% of what you expect. And that is the starting point.
Blunt force fact number 2, shit's always going to cost more than you think.
Absolutely. So you're going to now do the flip side of that with the expenses, and we're going to talk you through that, and you're going to lay those expenses out at about 125% of what you initially expect.
And blunt force fact number 3, success is design, not an accident.
So what's most important here is the fact that we are planning for success with a safety net. And that frequently we get all excited because this is our thing and we kind of put it out there and we want it to look as good as possible on paper. However, usually when we do that, we're taking the safety net away. So we're going to show you how to design this for safety. And also, what's better, Patrick, than when you go to your investors after you decide to take on some money for like a new business or a new project, and that first quarterly report is we outshot our numbers.
I mean, a lot of this is vibes, right? A lot of this is vibes.
Absolutely.
Because what you want to do is and we talk about a lot of this. We talk about this a lot in parenting in particular. When we do our fatherhood stuff. But the idea being is that you want to come out of it feeling good. And if you set yourself up with what would be a normal financial projection where it's like, here's where I think we're going to come in for revenue. Here's where I think we're coming in for expenses. So here's going to be the profit. If you use your rule and you kind of set everything a little bit differently and you make the adjustments to the calculations based on the 125-75 rule, the chances of you succeeding at the end and saying, hey, we did it. Not only did we do it, we came out better, right? And now everybody feels good about it, right? We come out with a positive. Whereas I think what you're saying is that, especially in startup with people there's a lot of unforeseen consequences. There's a lot of things that are going to come up, or just you're new, right? And so you're maybe not as good at what you're trying to do as you think you are. And the chances of failure are very high. So why have the failure in the first place, right? Why even have that? Why not set yourself up for success, right? And that's where success is design and not an accident. Message that we use pretty frequently. This topic is one that you who do a lot of financial planning in your startup consulting. So this is your rule, Brian LaFauci rule, but it came up when we were talking to Shed Guy. What's the Shed Guy's name? Dave Jones, right? So it came up. You're good friends.
Well,
you're really good friends who I just met.
I love Dave Jones, but we all know that name recognition is one of the is my weak point. When we had the Steve Jobs comment,
this guy's a guy you know, though. Yeah. All right, so anyway, we're not going to make fun of Brian anymore. But so this came up during the podcast, and Brian was like, I always use the 125-75 rule, and I was like, well, It's pot about that.
But
Let's
we are
talk about
potting
it.
about it.
Yeah.
We're potting
so,
about
So we talked about success being a design and not accent. So tell me how this came about for you in your consulting business. Like, it's come up so much that you actually bring it up. You're like, oh, you gotta use the 125/75 rule
every time.
All right. So let's talk about how it came up. Like what spurred it?
So let's bring some credibility to the concept here, right? And the reality is that I think at this stage, if I said that I've looked at over 1,000 financial projections, that would probably be an undersell. And that comes with that comes like some really great stuff in that you see patterns. So this rule really came out of patterns I would see every time that and I say every time, most times someone comes to me. So if we were to interact this together, inevitably, when someone puts together a business plan, they do so with a lot of excitement. And with that excitement comes this belief that, and even when backed by numbers of, well, I know this many people use this kind of thing now, right? You can do your research. And so when they speak to it, they almost always speak to it in a best case scenario way. And having followed companies as they've gone through the startup process, we see this on our call as well. People kind of launching into things and there being like a delay in the growth, right? And also seeing this in the companies that I've started. Inevitably, what comes up every single time is you cannot predict everything. It's impossible. So what does a financial projection do? Well, every time you add layers to a financial projection, you're bridging the gap from possible success to possible failure, right? So you're trying to expand the gap, right? So every time we add pieces in, we're trying to expand the gap. And this rule is in essence a way to further expand that gap. Rule of thumb, people are going to come to their financial numbers from a standpoint of obviously they liked the idea. So when you like an idea, you're leveraging already that other people think like you and they're going to be as passionate about it as you are. That is frequently not the case. Your passion for something typically is going to be tempered by your customer's passion for something. The other piece is that it is impossible to predict all of the variables that will come along with this venture you're going to get into. So if we can take any like actual thing, let's just take a food truck because food trucks are a common business start right now. So food trucks are going to come to you with, hey, this is where we think we're going to make for revenue. This is what our expenses are. And those expenses can be lined up really well. I researched the truck. I already got, I know how much the truck's going to cost. I know how much the build out's going to cost. I know how much all these things. Inevitably, there are costs in there that we cannot foresee. It's just the nature of it. When we connected the fire system, so we had a sprinkler system put in our sport complex after we bought it. We had to by code. We knew that. So we projected the sprinkler system with a buffer in there as well, right?
125?
125% buffer on the whole project. Knowing that inevitably, you forgot to do this back room, like whatever. If the sprinkler system was about $100,000 installed, there were parts of it that were more than that. But let's just take this. We had to do the fields eventually, which originally we didn't have to, and then we had to do it, so we had to budget that in. So it was about $100,000 install with the sprinklers. When we went to connect the sprinklers, the town charged us a $22,500 impact fee to connect to the water that we were already connected to. Now, we already were connected to the town. That impact fee is when you connect to the line. It's how that, right? My argument to them was pretty straightforward, right? It was, we're already connected to the water. Why would you impact me on I understand that the sprinkler system has to like have its own separate, but we're already like, we're not drawing the sprinkler system in a perfect world will never go off. We will not burn down. It will never go off. And all we're doing is filling the pipes once, right? Like, put thought to this. We're not drawing on this water ever in a perfect world. 99% of it, 22,500. Take the 125 rule. Right there, that one incident, it's gone. That buffer's already gone. That was one instance, right? This is what happens with businesses that project all the time. $22,000 on $100,000. Let's say the whole business startup is 100. That happened. That's frequent. Like, what do you need to start your business? $100,000. If you get hit with a $20,000 fee or anything along the way, do you have it in your pocket? Like, is that in the bank? Is it? Because those things happen all the time, right? So this is a way to then, if we do that with every line item, it gives us the protection that not every line item is going to hit that mark, but it might. And when it does, at least there's a buffer in there. So what does it affect? Well, it affects how much we ask for money. So we are correctly funded. Number one failure for businesses is not being correctly funded, being underfunded to perform, right? So when we do all that and we bump that number up, it translates to what our startup need is. Okay, so that's where this trickle down is very important, because worst case scenario, you pay interest on a little bit of money over a couple of years. And as you grow, you realize, hey, we didn't need that. You know, our bank accounts, let's just pay that back, right? I'll let you dump that extra cash.
I think what comes up in my head with different types of businesses, like you're talking about big capital projects with big capital investments. I mean, like moderate, right? I mean, there's way bigger than $100,000 and $20,000. But I'm even thinking of smaller startups with software expenses, or I'm just thinking of like little companies that, like, I can think of a few where it's not the big expense that's the problem. It's just they start paying like little expenses.
Yeah.
Right. It's like all of a sudden it's like I'm paying for this subscription, that subscription. I pick up this, I pick up that, I pick up that. And because each one of those things is small, you just think, oh, it's not that much.
Absolutely.
And then before you know it, you look at a statement, a bank statement.
Yep.
Like where'd all the money go? There's like 20 little, $9 things that I didn't have budgeted for.
Yeah, death by 1,000
Yeah,
pricks.
exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Or $20 a month subscriptions or whatever they are that I sign up for. I'm like, oh, I need that software. Or I'm going to need to be part of that program, that lead generation program, whatever it is. I'm going to need to be a part of that. And then, like, before you know it, poof.
It's gone.
Gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And so this is a way to protect against the fact that there's going to be things out there you need that you didn't think of, no matter how hard you think this through. So at least if we come to the table with, all right, we know this is going to happen, and we're preparing for it. So then if we take the flip side of that, right, and the other side of that end, which is you're not going to make as much as you think.
Right.
Now, inevitably, when we put together projections, we put them together usually with data. Where does data come from?
Experience, work that you've done in the past.
Okay.
You know?
And if we search it out, it'll come from existing businesses.
Right. Yeah.
But existing businesses are established.
Right.
So what we forget is that, they grew into that. So if I say to you, like, okay, well, the average industry revenue for a food truck is X, and you're like, well, average industry, okay, but what's not being accounted for there is the fact that they grew it, that the average also has an average of the food truck's been in business for 7-8 years. Mm-hmm. They grew into that average.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think people assume that they are going to start, launch the truck, park it, and get the same following that our buddy Shane at the Burgundian gets, because he's got a massive, following with a solid product that people seek out, right? Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen. Like, it doesn't work that way. By the time you find out about a new food truck or restaurant or things, and we can take that with anything, it takes time.
Right. Well, I think it's not just the time. I think that the challenge for the excited startup business entrepreneur is that what they're doing doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? So just if we're going to keep along the food truck argument, like let's say that there's going to be certain things, like if part of your projections is going to be like, I'm going to attend these X number of things, and I know that there's X number of people go to that event, and and then you do your projections as well, and but there's other factors, right? Like weather. Right. So let's say this is like bad weather that season. Like, and it's like, like we had a June, like the last couple of Junes.
I will not get involved.
Every day.
I have a hard, fast rule. And that hard, fast rule is I will never get involved with another business venture that is weather dependent.
Right.
I'm not telling anyone else you do what you got to do because we need certain things out there that are weather dependent.
Right.
Me personally, never, ever again will I allow myself behold it, which is sad because that means I would never get into farming as a full-time thing. It scares the shit out of me.
The other
a drought or whatever.
The other variables in that too, like we could say with the food truck example, is like somebody who's got like a trendy thing parks their truck right next to yours. Mm-hmm. And now the line outside of that truck is, or like across, like whatever, wherever. Like, I mean, like
right.
The competition changes, right? And like the trend changes or something like flips and people are like, oh, we all got to freaking get to that one. And now they don't have the revenue. They don't have the money in their pocket to spend at your truck. It's like none of these things exist in the vacuum, right? It's like, and it's not just that you don't foresee them. It's just like shit just changes.
Yeah.
It's not that you couldn't possibly have foreseen it, right?
And who are you? Yeah, and people always say this. People try my stuff. And we'll go to the food thing because I think we'll stick on the same topic. This applies in every industry, but we'll stick on the food truck topic. What is it that you think people say to justify their numbers? They say, people love my food.
Right.
I guarantee you they do. Right? My sister has a good friend. She's a good friend of Shannon's as well. And she was over my sister's house the other day and made this pizza. And my brother-in-law is a pizza aficionado, and they now my phone's blowing up. You gotta get this person started on a pizza business. The pizza's unbelievable, and I agree with all that. But you still gotta go through the process of stealing clientele from somewhere.
Right.
You're not creating new clients. Right? Like, this isn't like a new business startup where you're like, I got this new thing and people are going to want it because they can't get anywhere else. No. If you get into the food industry, you know what you're doing? You're stealing clientele.
Right.
That's all you're ever doing. Because everyone's eating, so that means now you're stealing them from somewhere else where they were going to go, inevitably.
Right.
So it's really tricky when you think about growth because the question you should be asking yourself is how quickly am I going to steal clients?
Right.
And that takes time because we're creatures of habit. Where do you top 3 places you go to eat? You get food when you get takeout. Go. Quick, top 3 places. Right off the top of head. 3 places. They don't have to be top 3 places.
I don't really do a lot of takeout.
Okay. Ask me.
What are the top 3 places you get takeout from?
Socrates Pizza.
Okay.
Village Tavern.
Yeah.
And I would say if there was a third, it might be Taco Shop.
Okay.
Right. So when I'm hungry, where does my mind go? I don't fucking search out like, oh, let's try. And neither do you.
See, that's why I'm the wrong person to ask then.
Because you do.
Because I'm more likely to say like, okay, what am I thinking? Like, fine, like what haven't I tried? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not like a creature of habit.
Okay.
Now.
All right. What about you, Shannon? Are you a creature of habit or do you search out new stuff when it's time to like pick food? Creature of habit. So let's just say they're half the society's like you, half's like me. That already took the pool, and I'm a tough customer for me to start going to you because I already got my stuff.
Right.
Like I already got my stuff that so now you're going to try to get me, and that's going to take time,
right.
Marketing, exposure, right? And even to get you, it's going to take time, marketing, exposure.
Right.
Because you have to do the search.
Or I would actually be more likely to be like, like some of these places, I mean, if we keep with food, you see this at first, right? I mean, like not a lot of places.
Everyone tries it and they drop off.
Everyone's like, just like, they freaking fill the place.
Yep.
Like, oh my God, I can't wait to try this. And then the creatures of habit go back to their habit. Or then you got the people like me who are constantly looking for the new thing. So it's like, all right, this isn't the new thing anymore. Now I'm going to try the next new thing. Right. And so like, that's, and then you don't know. It's hard. It's really hard to predict. It's better to look at a market and have a good idea of what the current market looks like.
Yeah.
It's really hard to predict if new players are going to enter the market because you don't know what conversations are happening at other people's dining room tables.
Right.
Saying we're going to start a business.
Yeah.
You don't know when they're going to start a business. You don't know. So like that is hard to really, it's really hard to project.
And inevitably,
Unless you're jumping on something where it's like, it's a trend and there's going to be a bunch of new people coming into this.
right.
But like in stuff area, like the food truck being a good example where like you really don't know where the trends are going to come from.
Yep.
So it's like, it could be just this food idea over here or this company that knows a lot of people over here. It could be anything.
Yep.
That could, but like it's going to be constantly disrupted.
When we have, we do have a worksheet for our listeners on this. So there is a financial worksheet you can download. When you're putting it together, you're going to put it together. And then once you're done, you're going to go back and apply the 125/75 rule to it, increasing all your expenses by 25% to bring them to 125%, decreasing all your revenue by 25% to bring it down to 75. And then, all right, so now let's bring this full circle to, okay, now what? Well, now what is, now you're going to go into those profit and loss statements that you just produced, and are you still making money? Frequently, what we'll find is, we're not right now. So, okay, it doesn't mean it's a dead deal, but what it does mean is we need to reevaluate a bit because that is the baseline that we need to be operating from to protect our own investment, to give us the best chance that we're delivering for success, right? And at that point, you go back in and you say, okay, are there things I'm going to consciously cut out? Or are there things that I need to reevaluate? And usually what we find, once we do that, and maybe it takes us into the red a little bit, what we have to start evaluating is frequently it's payroll, who we're paying, and sometimes it's your payroll. Right? Sometimes the low-hanging fruit is this can work just fine, but that check you thought you were going to write yourself day one, week one, is not the check. So what do? I don't know. Maybe there's a bunch of options here. Maybe you finance your first year payroll, right? Because at the end of the day, if you need to take a certain amount in, instead of it coming out of the profits, if I take, and just throw a number out there, but if I take $20,000 or $30,000 and I finance it over 30 years, well, it's much less expensive in the short term on a profit and loss sheet, and now I have the money built in to pay myself for a year, right, to get through that, right? So it's things like that we can look to adjust. You can always refinance that loan, okay? You can always do things to recoup it, but at the end of the day, it's things we look to adjust like that, or maybe I can't hire that person for that specific role. Maybe I need to be a little more creative, and this is where this is where we really dig in to making a successful start, and this is where we have the most impact, and this is where I feel like we've been able to create the most amount of successful starts. Is in this fine tuning of, all right, that was your ideal situation. Doesn't work. Now what? Now what are our options? Well, where are our big expenses here? And I always caution on, well, we'll just sell more, because it goes back to you already started out at 100, what you think is real. So you're probably not going to sell more, but are we charging the right amount, right? Is there potential maybe where we can look at some of this revenue, or one of the things we can go through with our clients is, do we go from a fixed cost to a variable cost model? Because when you do financial projections, variable cost models of expenses, and if we're losing you a little bit, like, you lost me, right? Variable cost model is when your expenses are more tied to delivering the product than they are like a set number. For example, a fixed cost model would be, I'm going to hire an employee for $500 a week, right? A variable cost model of the same concept would be, I'm just going to bring someone in at $15 an hour for whenever the food truck goes out. So the more the food truck goes out, the more we're paying that employee, but we're not paying them. So from a growth standpoint, and then I'll bring it back full circle, we won't go too far. From a growth standpoint, a variable cost model allows you to keep more money initially, but you lose more over time as you grow, okay? Whereas a fixed cost model, you spend more initially, but you keep more as you grow. So a lot of times the way to start is to go from a fixed to variable, and then at a certain point in time, you switch it. And now you're going to take that person and make them, hey, how about I'm just going to pay you, set amount every week, right? Whatever. But these are the conversations that come out of the initial starting point of making the 125/75 adjustment and then saying, all right, now how do we make it work? And it's like playing a video game, right? And then we plug and play these key things. And sometimes it just doesn't work there and you got to make a tough decision. The end state for our listener is, we get to a point where after applying the rule and making certain adjustments, we're in the green. And I think at that point, if you've gotten this reviewed and you get someone to look at it and like make sure you're not missing anything big, at that point, you're about as clear as you're going to be at the edge of the cliff to take the jump, right? We talk about jumping off that cliff. And that, is there always risk in business? Yes. But have you tried to reduce that as much as possible? And that's why it's by design. Like the blunt force fact number 3, success is by design.
And this isn't just reducing risk. This is really providing an environment for success.
Blueprint.
Yeah.
Like Jay-Z, the blueprint.
Planning
1,
for success.
2, 3,
because
4, blueprint 6.
Because it's really hard if you're going to be taking the quote unquote leap, right? And you're saying, okay, I'm going to take a leap. It's a leap of faith, right? Then you want to come out of it feeling good about it.
Absolutely.
Right? And how do you feel good about it? We did better than we thought we were going to do.
Yeah, there's nothing better.
And what you've done is with this 125/75 rule is you've designed doing better than you thought into your plan. And that's a vibe thing, right? It makes you feel better. And if you have other people involved in the business, it makes them feel better. It's like, and like you said, you go to your investors.
Win, win, win.
We did better than
quadruple win.
We did better than we projected.
That's a fucking awesome conversation. As opposed to, we can't pay your dividend this quarter.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like,
as opposed to we didn't live up to expectations.
Thanks.
Right. And so what you're doing is you design the model for success, which not a lot of people. And I think that it's not just it's like, where's the optimism? As I was thinking about, like some people, like you were talking about, people being excited about it, and it's like when they're telling people about what they're doing, whoever those people are, whether they're the bank or whether they're friends, right? It's this optimistic view of here's why we're going to succeed, right? It's like this because you're selling it, and when you do that, you're selling it to yourself too. And you're saying to yourself, like, this is why it's going to succeed. But what we're doing is we're not designing the optimism into the start. We're designing a little bit of pessimism into the start so that
you have to.
There's optimism at the end.
Yeah.
And
realism is more of it than pessimism, because the reality is, like I said, we go back to the food truck thing. The reality is, yes, your food is great. Now stop me from going to those 3 places that are so convenient for me already, right? So that's the piece that gets lost in there. That's the next level of business planning is understanding the mechanism at work. That's going to take a little time, and to develop and to make real. So for our listeners, we've got a great worksheet for you to kind of build off of this. Applying this rule is a fantastic way for you to really start to dig in. And, we don't say this too often, but I think with this video, if you download the worksheet, you use it, and you still have questions, feel free to reach out, so we can support you on this journey. This is something that we've done a ton of, and can definitely help you walk through success. And not one of our jobs as consultants is conservation of wealth. conserving your wealth, right? So you not doing something that potentially could lose you a bunch of money, that's a very good business decision. And I've gone through plenty of those, through playing with clients, through playing with myself, where I'm like, you know what? I love this idea. It felt great. It's the, Friday night over a whiskey by the fire, like, we're going to kill it, right? Then you dig into it and you really kind of start to put it together. And you come to realize, like, all right, this might be a little more challenging. Doesn't mean yes or no, but it means we got to really work out some of these things and make sure that we're protecting ourselves going forward.
So, to wrap, we make sure you get to the description on the video or the podcast, however you're consuming this. Download the worksheet, and then start applying the 125-75 rule, which is a really extremely simple way of developing a financial projection that's going to be successful.
Do you have our 3 blunt force facts to wrap us up?
Right? So we'll wrap it up with those. So when you're developing your financial projections, you want to institute Brian LaFauci's 125-75 rule. For the 125-75 rule, we have 3 blunt force facts. Blunt force fact number 1, you never make as much as you think. Blunt force fact number 2, shit's going to cost more than you think. And blunt force fact number 3, success is design, not an accident. You got any closing thoughts there, Mr. LaFauci? No closing.
Listening is leadership, buddy.
Listening is
leadership.
Brian
LaFauci.
Yeah, thank you so much for enjoying our podcast, Patrick Marino. Until next time.
Bye-bye.